Can you walk out of a lease if you're buying a home? Let's answer this little, I would say, difficult question today. Hi, I'm Amol Heda with Keller Williams Bay Area Estates and author of Thriving Through Ownership. Been in real estate for about over 2 decades now and keep coming across these situations a lot of times. You will think, oh, what happens if I buy a home and I have 8 months remaining on the lease? If you have just 1 month remaining on the lease, great. But if you have 8 or 9 months remaining on the lease, how do you deal with that? That's the question we are going to answer today on this video. So, you're searching for a home, you're tired of paying rent, and you're getting into contract, you are in contract, and great news, you're about to buy your home. So you talk to your landlord, and the landlord says, well, you have a 1-year lease. How do you approach it? So the first very important thing to understand is that a lease gives the tenant and the landlord both a stability to think that they are in a contract and they will not have to worry about the landlord will not have to keep finding a tenant anytime that the tenant leaves, and the tenant does not have to worry about being kicked at least until that lease period ends. So the lease is generally gives you this stability when the tenant is living in the property. Now guess what happens? You are only 2 months into the lease for a 1-year contract, and the rest of the 10 months are now still due. And you find this amazing home at an amazing price and you want to get in and go move in. What happens? You walk into the landlord says your lease is 1 year. You have to fulfill your lease. So with typical legalese, you are responsible for the rent due for the period of the lease. Doesn't matter what your deposit is. Doesn't matter how much your landlord gets damaged, but that's the responsibility. But right there, in California, the law is that the landlord cannot collect rent from 2 tenants at the same time on the same property. So, suppose you break your lease, tenant who is buying the house breaks the lease and walks out in 2 months' time. The tenant owes 10 months of rent to the landlord. So what happens in this case is that the landlord cannot just say, okay, fine, you break the lease, give me 8 months of rent and I'll collect 8 months of rent from you and go rent the property out and collect the 8 months of rent from the other tenant too. That's not how California law is. California law is that, okay, you break the lease, you're responsible for the lease rental for the 8 months period. You have to just pay the appropriate costs because the landlord has to put an effort in finding another tenant. So there is a cost involved in replacing the tenant. In typical real estate investor terms, most of the property managers around here, they charge 50% of the first month's rent to find a new tenant and put them into the property. Now, if that's the kind of expense that the landlord is going to go through, you will be liable for those expenses as a tenant who gives that notice. Now, additionally, for the period that the unit doesn't get rented, the tenant is responsible. So say it takes the landlord 2 months to find the next tenant. The current tenant will have to pay 2 months worth of rent at least, based on California rules. So each state has different rules. California, these are the rules that we are typically aware of. So it's possible that you might be able to help your landlord find the replacement tenant and you may not be on the hook for the remaining period. There are ways to even sublease if the landlord does not prevent you from subleasing the property. So check your rules, your lease agreement, talk to your landlord. A lot of times they are sympathetic, but yet it's only fair to expect the leasing costs, the loss of rent that be paid to the landlord. I hope this was helpful. It's a little convoluted issue, a more involved question. I hope you found the answer on this video. If you did like it, please share it with somebody who might need it. Thanks a lot. Bye.